Hello and welcome to another episode of Fielding the 68, brought to you by Field of 68. Today, you're just stuck with two bracketologists. No host today. You're dealing with me, Lucas Harkins, along with Rocco Miller. Rocco, we've done this, several years together now. It's not a new rodeo for you and I to be on the show together. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Just got to St. Louis a couple hours ago. Ready for the big Billikens Dayton Arch Baron Cup game tonight. Place is going to be sold out. Should be fun. Great to see you, Lucas. Always awesome to do the shows with you. Your deep knowledge and numbers breakdowns and contrasting style with mine. It's always a great experience.
Appreciate it. You're always around the country a little bit more than I am, so it's always good to know where you're at for each show. I'm still, back at my house in Indy, as per usual, getting ready for Georgetown Butler tomorrow. I'm sure we'll get into bubble stuff later, but before we really get into the bubble, how have you felt about how things have churned out over the last couple weeks near the top of the seed list?
Yeah, I think lately it just feels a little stuck. The 1 through 4 teams have been established. There's been no reason to move any of them off. We had our first real opportunity with a showdown with Nebraska, Michigan on Tuesday night, and Nebraska played so well without Rink Moss and almost pulled it off, but Michigan ultimately holds serve. Funny enough, it improves Nebraska's power numbers where they really needed some help. But Michigan, of course, the more deserving 1 seed for today. But Nebraska is still right there. I think Illinois' win at Purdue last week, that was a shift at the start of this week to get them up to the 2 seed line. But I think overall, and we said this on Monday, there's 14 teams right now that have really, to me, stood out as elite contenders for a 1 seed. That goes, of course, from Arizona at the top down to where BYU is in the middle of the 4 line. I know BYU just lost close to Arizona, but the Big 12, Lucas, not only the Big 12, but the Big 10 as well, totally backloaded the schedule. So we still have, in the month of February and this weekend coming up, we have so many big matchups where these teams are going to play each other. So whether it's a BYU or a Texas Tech in the Big 12 or a Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Nebraska in the Big 10, if any of those teams emerge and kind of run through their big games, they're going to be a 1 seed in the end. And I think that's been really interesting. How about for yourself?
Yeah, I've landed with 11 of my top 16 teams between the Big 12 and the Big 10 coming into today. A pretty SEC-loaded 5 line. But those two conferences really dominating the top until you get there. I think, as you mentioned, the Michigan-Nebraska game, and I think it's not a surprise to see Michigan still on our 1 line when we get there shortly. But my question for you, Nebraska, is I'm assuming you kept them on your 2 line. If they were there already, which I did. Did you move them at all on the 2 from a result of that? Did you move them up because of the metric boost, down because of a loss? It just kind of they stayed steady for me right at the top of the 2 line.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I was torn, honestly, going into the week because I thought they had a case since they were undefeated. That road win at Illinois is better than any win that Michigan has. And then you have if you want to compare them to UConn, you can do that as well. But Nebraska before the Michigan game already had 4 quad 1A wins. They had a win at Ohio State. The New Mexico win matters in their MTE back in November. Obviously, you can't beat being undefeated. So they were already really close. Then they go to Michigan and they overperformed despite losing. And so to me, that really showed from you hear some committee members from time to time talk about the eye test where that does matter. Nebraska definitely passed the eye test, especially when you consider they were shorthanded. The only things really holding Nebraska back is the strength of schedule at 297 is by far the worst out of any team, even in the top 15 or so, and let alone the top 5. And then the other part was the power numbers, where they went from about 14th or so on average to closer to 10th after the result. So they keep playing at that level, and they're going to keep getting matchups like this in that league. So they get Illinois on Sunday. And we'll see where they're at on Monday. I mean, that's another big opportunity. They have a chance to sweep the Illini on Sunday.
So now with that in mind, let's dive into what we have as consensus number 1 seeds across the 4 of us at Fielding the 68 right now. Not a whole lot of shift, but a shift at least. Consensus number 1 seeds right now, Arizona, Duke, Michigan, and UConn. Same 4 as earlier in the week, but you will see Michigan after that win over Nebraska leaps to the number 3 overall seed. They did that for me. Are you in the same boat there, Rocco, with that switch?
I sure am. I sure am. And I was going to ask you the same question. Good question, Lucas. I think Arizona and Duke kind of speak for themselves. Arizona, I mean, this is getting amazing. They have 8 wins against the field. They're all in quad one, and only one of them's a home win. So if you like road damage, hard to beat the UConn, BYU road wins that Arizona has. If you like neutral court damage, they beat Florida, Bama, UCLA, UCF, who's an interesting tournament team today. We'll see if the Knights hold on down the road. And depending on where you're at with San Diego State, I think they're close enough you would count them as well. Just everybody in their path. They look like the best team in the country when you watch them. Very impressive. Duke, to me, has the highest floor in the country because, I got to look at Duke when they played at Cal, but I've watched some of their other bigger games on TV like you guys, and their defense is just so elite. They're never going to be out of any game. They lull you to sleep in segments. I call it the drip campaign. They get you going on kind of like an email marketing campaign. Eventually, they're just going to win that game almost every time out. They're so hard to beat. Incredible length on that team, and of course, a Duke level amount of NBA players. So those two are pretty obvious. And then I think the switch occurred because Michigan beat Nebraska, as we said, and UConn continues to struggle in their wins. They're still winning ball games, but again, another struggle with Providence the other night. Typically you would see a 1 seed in the power numbers be somewhere in that top 5 or 6. UConn slips somewhere around 9 to 11, depending on where you look. Obviously, the resume for UConn is unbelievable, so they belong as a 1 seed. But I think we got the order right. How do you feel about it overall?
I'm kind of looking at it like we've talked about this in the past, more towards the bubble than we do at the top of the bracket. Is like those resume metrics have a little bit more to do with selection, whereas you look at the quality metrics more towards seeding. And you can make that same argument with the 1 seed line right now. Like UConn's resume, it's got 4 quad 1A wins, 12-1 against the upper 2 quadrants. It certainly has the wins. Its only loss was to the number 1 overall seed in Arizona in a game it played without Terrace Reed and Braylon Mullins. There's plenty on the resume to warrant a 1 seed. But to your point of quality metrics, they're between 9 and 13 across the board. They don't have a quality metric that would say they're even a 2 seed at this point. If you just take the raw average of the 3 quality metrics on the team sheet, PPI, KenPom, and T-Rank, they're 12th in the country. And I think that's where they sit. And you compare that to Arizona, Michigan, Duke are all of them ranked top 4 respectively across all 3 of those metrics. UConn's definitely a step behind in that respect, but certainly has the resume of a 1 seed.
I agree. I agree. I think I'm okay with the term quality metrics when we're talking about these really good teams, but I will not use that term when we talk about the bubble. Just a little warning.
The not so quality predictive ones.
Exactly, because there's no substance when you're just beating quad 4 teams by 100. I don't call that quality. It's just like picking on the little guy.
So now, maybe with UConn now trending, a little bit further from those top 3 seed lines, top 3 number 1 seeds in quality metrics. If there was a team that would drop off the 1 line, is that the team for you, or do you think there's a little bit more of Michigan has the potential to still drop off there? Or you feel most confident in obviously Arizona and Duke at this point?
I do feel most confident about Arizona and Duke for the reasons I said earlier. However, with Arizona, I mean, the Big 12 is loaded. If they just have a bad week or two, it'll be a little easier to start picking them apart, and maybe they land in that 4 or 5 spot. They could slip off. There's still room there. I think in the ACC, Duke's playing in a better ACC, but they're still clearly the top dog. I mean, look what they just did to Louisville.
Yeah.
So I think Duke's definitely the safest because of just how much distance there is between them and the next best team, whether it is Louisville or Virginia or whoever, North Carolina, whoever you want to throw in there. When it comes to Michigan, I mean, they've skated by multiple times, whether you look at the start of the year with the TCU and the Wake Forest games where they could have easily lost both of those, and the way they played lately when they lost at home to Wisconsin, squeaking by Nebraska, a couple other close ones, right? So, and Michigan's got a bunch of big ones starting tonight, once again with Michigan State. They could easily fall off. And then UConn, I think, is the easy choice, right? The way they've been playing.
Yeah.
Any Big nothing against your favorite conference, Lucas, but any Big East loss at this point for UConn is going to be a killer when they're getting compared to these Big 10 and Big 12 and Duke type teams.
Yeah, I mean, when you compare just the singular losses, or in Arizona's case, no losses, Of the 1 seeds, it's Duke's loss to I think most of us would agree, a 4 seed level Texas Tech. UConn's losses to the number 1 overall seed in Arizona, and then Michigan's lost, maybe a 9 or 10 seed Wisconsin at home. I think is where you get a little bit there. So if outside of Arizona and Duke, let's say it's UConn or wow, where am I blanking? Whether it's UConn or Michigan. Or Michigan dropping off the 1 line. Who's the team that you would pick out as this is the team I feel most confident potentially getting to that 1 line? Obviously not today, but with the remaining schedule they have in front of them.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, this remaining schedule is important, of course, because you got to have a path. You have to have a path to get there. And I also think the way you're playing and the way your team is built is equally as important from a basketball perspective. And maybe this is recency bias, but I got to see Illinois play last night in person. Obviously, an impressive team in the last 6 or 7 weeks, winning at Purdue last weekend. We'll see how they do at Nebraska this Sunday. But I think the way that they're playing and the way they're built, they're the biggest team in the country by average height. I mean, it was like so many giants out there watching these guys play. Everybody can shoot it so well. They can play inside, outside. They're so improved defensively. They have the freshman phenom that came out of nowhere in Wagler. I mean, there's so many things to like about Illinois. They certainly look like a Final Four contender, let alone they should probably be a national championship contender. And the trajectory is straight up like this, climbing the mountain. So if they keep playing this way and win the Big Ten, obviously win at Nebraska this week, they're going to be a one seed in no time, and they might even work their way to the top of the board. So that's going to be my choice for today, but obviously a lot of great options. And I'm curious, Lucas, who's yours?
So I'm going with Iowa State right now. Similar to Illinois, I think a top 5 team by quality metrics. They're already playing at that level where they're going to have, if the opportunities are on the schedule to win them, odds are right now, predictive metrics, we'll call them quality metrics for potential 1 seeds, indicate that they will have the chance to win those kinds of games. And you look at Iowa State's remaining schedule in particular, like the 2 of the teams I looked at for this are Iowa State and Houston. And where Iowa State has an advantage in terms of likelihood of winning those games is playing them at home. They still go at Arizona and at BYU, but they also get Houston at home. They still have Kansas and Texas Tech at home as well. It's a lot of quad 1 opportunities, and not just quad 1 opportunities, but really, really good quad 1 opportunities, and some of them coming in Hilton. So if they can pick up those kind of victories, especially with how good the Big 12 is and how respected I expect it to be from 1 seeds down to 11 seeds this year, I don't think it'd be out of the question to see 2 of them land on the 1 line.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good choice because out of the remaining, as crazy as that schedule sounds, it's actually one of the easier ones out of all the Big 12 elites. I looked at Houston's, I looked at BYU's, looked at Arizona's, and I would take Iowa State's over all of those in terms of the actual possibility of them running it. Not that they're going to run it, but maybe go 8-1 or something along 9-1, something along those lines. So we'll see how they do. I'm still a little leery on how Iowa State does. I know they did pull out the St. John's game back in Vegas by 1 point, but in a lot of these tight games, because they've just blown out so many teams, they're just different types of games. Sure. I want to see how they handle those tense moments in like a tie game with 3 minutes to go. Obviously Cincinnati put a lock on them. Cincinnati had amazing defense, just a lot of absent offensive performances. So it's a great choice because the path is there and the skill level is certainly there. So what else? Anybody else we should mention in this section, Lucas?
I think we're good on the top. And when you talk about tense moments, you're really picking between some really tight resumes of really good teams right now. Is it really all that tense between your last 1 seed and top 2 in some cases? Maybe not as much. But I think we'll get into those tense moments more after a break when we come back and discuss the bubble teams at this point in college hoops.
As you know by now, we have teamed up with BetMGM again this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we will have special offers for Field of 68 fans, including same-game parlays, best-in-class live betting, and daily odds boost. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, you sign up using bonus code FIELD, you deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Make this college basketball season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Are you trying to follow everything happening in college basketball? It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for recruiting news, game analysis, portal updates, and much, much more. For just $50 a year, you get access to the same information that your favorite coaching staff is subscribed to. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help. Make sure you subscribe today.
All right, we're back. We've discussed one seeds. We've discussed teams capable of reaching the one seed line. Let's talk the complete opposite of the at-large field, and let's look at teams that maybe aren't contending for their conference titles, but rather contending for hopefully at-large bids for maybe for some teams the first time in some years. This is, a lot of times the most fun part of bracketology for me is investigating what you get in terms of resumes towards the end of the at-large field. Rocco, when you go through your bracket, whether it's in January or March, where do you stand on evaluating bubble teams? And I wouldn't say necessarily your enjoyment of it, but where would you place it in like percentage of time percentage of time you spend on your field comes down to these last 8 teams in the field?
I actually do an inside-out approach, and I love specializing in the bubble. It's kind of my bread and butter, but it is a headache more often than not, because especially in January, the data is so immature. You're basically putting a team in based on one result, which is not going to be enough when it's in March. But it's just like a hint of what this team could be. You're getting an idea of whose non-conference strength of schedule was good or bad. That does help. You see like a George Mason at 346 or an Oklahoma State at a 305 and a California at like a 327, you're starting to think, okay, it's going to take some extra to get teams like that into the field. And then you start breaking it down from there. Road wins mean everything. Road wins are gold, at least historically. After last year, I'm starting to second guess some of my bubble stuff because the Texas inclusion really threw me for a loop. But no, honestly, I like it too because I also track because I know the committee does this at a high level at the end. How many teams in the projected field you've beat. It's actually pretty easy on the bubble right now because some of these teams have 0, some of them only have a couple. If you have 1, we'll take it kind of thing. And then that helps me go back to the top of the board so I can count like a team like Arizona. Okay, how many teams in the field did they actually beat? So sometimes it's easier to start with the bubble. But yeah, I get there's like no right answers to that, but it's almost a preference. The actual committee, of course, gets to it at the end, but then they have an extra day or two to debate teams, and there's no more important debate than making sure they get the who's in and who's out. But how about for you, Lucas? What's your process like?
Especially right now, I think I was going to ask you about this as a follow-up because of how I do it. So when I'm assessing these teams, the wins over the field thing is a metric that I'll look at as well. And at this point in the season, I go a little bit further into like wins over the field plus main at-large selection pool. Like I cut down my list pretty quickly to about top 70-ish teams that I'll look at, and sometimes that shrinks even further as I get further along. It's like, okay, maybe only 12 of these teams qualify as wins over the bubble of teams that are out of my field. So like if you beat, not to give away something, but if you beat like a Stanford, who's in my next 4 out right now, like that would qualify for me as like a win over the field, or like, California and Stanford played each other, like that kind of instance. I wonder, so for me, I include up to probably 12 to 16 teams out right now as like, this is a quote unquote, really like quality-ish win. Cause I don't know where, like, I don't know. I don't want to count, and we'll get into last 4 in and first 4 out soon, but like, I don't want to count a win at home over my last team in the field as like a better win than winning on the road over my first team out. So where is your kind of drive? As do you pick that field and then just go, these are your wins over the field and static 68, that's what you got? Or do you extend a little bit further into wins over teams that are really on the cut line too?
Yeah, I try to extend as much as I can. On Mondays and especially in January, it can be hard. It's a little abstract. There's some teams I just got to go with my gut a little bit. Like I guess Monday, like Baylor would have been a good example. At one point, I was counting Baylor as a win against the field. Obviously, I knew another loss killed them, and I put them on the outside. I basically have a breakdown of in and out for the exercise purpose only, and I'll just have to make some calls. And they're not always right. Sometimes I have to. It's not like I'm going to go back and redo all the work after I determine one team was off. But I just go like a closest to the pin, guess and check system. And then Fridays, it's actually a lot more accurate because on Fridays, I've already got a good starting point. There's only been one new result added to the mix since our Monday show. And it's pretty easy to clean up and audit, and I'm ready to rock on Fridays. So I kind of like it that way because it makes you like start over every Monday. So those Sunday nights can get long and heavy, as you know. But yeah, I try to get as close as I can. The reason why is it's a giant game of house of cards where, let's say UCLA beats, Indiana. They're playing each other this weekend, right? And eventually Indiana's not a tournament team. Eventually UCLA, besides that Purdue win, has a sketchy resume themselves. You start second guessing like how good they are. And it helps. It can help in certain cases. It might not help like next week, but it'll help in a month. And so that's why I like to stick to that throughout. So it's just kind of cut and dry that way for the next 6 to 7 weeks.
So I asked this as part of like leading into my own last four in right now as kind of giving an explanation as to like wins over the field and how that relates. So my last four in right now is New Mexico, Ohio State, San Diego State, and Virginia Tech. And like starting with New Mexico, part of that thing is like right now as a giveaway to the next segment here, like I have Santa Clara out of my field, but New Mexico has a home win over Santa Clara. That's the kind of win that, boosts. It's not a win over the field for me, but I would qualify it as a win over field plus bubble. Yeah. Same with that. They won at VCU as well. Virginia Tech, my last team in the field, similar situation. They have a win at home over California, a team I have on the outside of the field. So like that's where a lot of these things have kind of twisted, at least at this point in the year, is there's so many teams in this last 8 teams in the field to like the first 16 teams out that are close enough to one another that it's hard to determine where that quality really ends. And now with these teams in the middle, Ohio State and San Diego State, Ohio State's a team that it is hard to deny from a metric standpoint. Just one quadrant 1 win. They're 4-6 in quads 1 and 2. But they're top 50 in all but one metric, top 45 in all but one metric. And there's a few of these teams here on these 10, 11 seed lines right now that are getting a little bit more of a boost from metrics than their resumes than maybe I would think in a month from now. In a month from now, there's a little bit more to everybody's resume, a little bit more meat on it for everybody, and a little bit less metric reliance as a result of that. But like a team like Miami, which is top 45 across every single metric, is probably one that deserves to be in the field right now, even though its best win to date is over Wake Forest. When you compare that to some other teams, like a Texas that has really great quality wins, but doesn't have the metrics, at least the resume metrics of a team like a Miami or Ohio State. So I think right now it's this weird juggling point of trying to figure out, is there enough win-loss stuff on the resume to outweigh what the metrics say, or is there enough metrics quality or non-quality to overcome the results saying the opposite? So that's where I've finished in my last 4 in right now. Where are you at?
Yeah, no, I like what you said. I'll start with New Mexico about them specifically, because I think if when it comes down to it with the actual committee, these are long discussions. They've talked about these teams. They've looked at their resumes time and time again, especially on those last couple of selections. And with New Mexico specifically, if we were in a real life scenario where Santa Clara is as close as they are to breaking through and you have that one result, hopefully the committee is going to know that Jake Ensminger didn't play. But assuming that they don't know as much about mid-major plus teams as we do, they might just give New Mexico all the credit in the world for pounding them. And it's still hard to pound them without Jake. So if you're going to only pick one of those 2 mid-major plus teams, which I think there is a psychological dynamic for your 4 spots, if you just have a bunch of Power Fives and then you have a George Mason, Santa Clara, New Mexico trio, you want to probably try to figure out a way to at least get one in. And New Mexico has the best credentials of the 3. And that Santa Clara result helps tremendously. But they also, like you said, that road win at VCU, based on the schedule New Mexico was able to put together, based on the fact that New Mexico is all brand new in terms of every player on that roster, every coach on that staff, none of them were there last year. You have to understand that story, and I think that's what goes into these discussions. So I like the New Mexico selection. I'm there with you on Ohio State as well. It's a weird one because there's really nothing impressive. I mean, they really just have a home win over UCLA out of anybody on the board. But the fact that they haven't really screwed up is enough right now, and they've played enough of the bottom of the Big Ten to build up an 8-6 record in what I call the meaningful record when you take quad 4 away. And if any team in a big league like that is 8-6 or 2 games over 500, they're getting in. So Ohio State gets in, but we're sending them nearby to Dayton. We'll see if the Buckeye fans are even excited to buy tickets to that. The Virginia Tech selection is very similar to Ohio State because they only just have the one home win against the field. It's a better win because Virginia is higher up on the board than UCLA. But it took 3 overtimes. And I think the other part of Virginia Tech's story, we mentioned this on Monday, I won't belabor it again, but losing on a heartbreaker from 50-some feet to Boopie Miller and SMU, they lost another heartbreaker that they should have won to Wake Forest. If those 2 results flip, Virginia Tech's much, much safer and a clear tournament team. And they're still on top of all the bad luck they've had. They're still 10-6 in the meaningful games. The last one that I think was really hard for me to include because Indiana has the Purdue win now, and they don't really have a bad loss. But before the Purdue game, they had a very clear cutoff. Their 7 hardest games, lost them all. Every other game, they won them all, but they were all non-tournament teams. I'm sure you saw the same divide. So now they have the 1 good win mixed in there, but they've lost to the other 7 good teams they've played. I think one of the 7 is non-tournament. So I guess just good enough for now. I think when you watch Indiana play, you're like, damn, this team is good. Like we saw them get a huge lead on Nebraska and let that go away. So again, I'm looking at them on a larger story. Like, okay, that's why these guys are like around 30th in KenPom and you know the other power numbers on the sheet. So you have to just imagine going. You have to project a little bit. Indiana projection. They should be able to clean up that record as they go, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think to 2 of your points with Virginia Tech, obviously they've had a couple of results go against them, but also they've had the triple overtime win was a win in that favor.
Right. Made up for one of them.
A note that I made earlier this week in Bubble Watch is KenPom has its listing of like most exciting games of the year. Virginia Tech's played in 3 of the top 23. All 3 of those are wins: the triple OT over Virginia, and the wins over Providence and South Carolina. And then
so the SMU game didn't make the cut.
Unless I might have just missed over at the time, but I don't think so. I might not have had as much up and down until like obviously the last second was pretty radical shift. Yes. And as far as Indiana goes, I think that they're a team that I think they were my 5th to last team in the field, but got a little bit of a seed boost to your point of like when they select the teams and then seed the teams. I selected Indiana, but by the time it came to seeding them, those quality metrics have a pretty good boost of ranking top 30 across the board on average. So I put them up onto a 10 seed line from there. But as consensus, we are Indiana last team in consensus. As part of the consensus last 4 in of New Mexico, Ohio State, Virginia Tech, and Indiana. Rocco, these are exactly your 4 a little bit. Ohio State, New Mexico flopped. 3 of these 4 are my same 4. As a note, San Diego State is not in our last 4 in or any of the bubble conversation because for our purposes, San Diego State is the Mountain. For our fielding the 68 consensus bracket, San Diego State is the Mountain West representative. For me, I do auto bids a little bit differently than others since most auto bids are determined by your conference tournament. I use a metric average to determine who would be the projected favorite to win that conference tournament. And in this case, Mountain West is still projected to be a Utah State league. Therefore, San Diego State's on my bubble, even if it's not for our consensus. But Rocco, with our consensus last 4 in, I mean, I can't imagine you have much complaints or comments to make about it.
No, it doesn't usually work out this way for me. I'm usually the edgy guy, but I think I got some cold water in the face with Texas getting in last year. So I'm just conforming to the powers that be. If you have a team like Indiana with amazing television ratings on the last spot versus my poor Broncos in Santa Clara, if that's really a thing, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying it has to be that way every year, and hopefully it's not. But Indiana with that Purdue win is better than Santa Clara's win over St. Mary's. And obviously, problem with Santa Clara, we'll talk about them in a second, is that Loyola lost, which I was on the call for. Yep. Loyola actually looked like Loyola that day, but they haven't in any other game. So hard one to explain, but it's really unfortunate for the Broncos.
So I'll have you start with the Broncos then as you get into what your first four out is right now.
Let's jump in there. It starts with Santa Clara. Like, again, they're just as selectable at this point as the majority of the last four in that we had. With Santa Clara, it is that quad 4 loss to Loyola in beautiful Santa Cruz. Last minute shot there by Justin Moore. They outplayed the Broncos that day, and they were healthy. And it's been a rough year for Loyola. Otherwise, the win over St. Mary's really gets Santa Clara in serious consideration, and they will get to play St. Mary's again on the road. So that's an opportunity to sweep the Gales. If that happens, I think it'll be very difficult to leave them out. The other element is they have a home Gonzaga game, and that's coming up fairly soon. If they get Gonzaga a little bit shorthanded, and they did beat Gonzaga full strength last year. I like this Santa Clara team in general. They're deeper than they've ever been, in my opinion. There's still, some runway here for the Broncos to work with, but there are, in addition to all that, there are a bunch of landmines in the WCC. They play Loyola Marymount coming up tomorrow. That's an example of a game you just can't afford to lose. So just a lot of elimination games at their level. The next team I have on the list, maybe they shouldn't belong in this order because right now you really can't take them, but it is the Missouri Tigers. I'll be over there in Columbia tomorrow to get my eyes on these guys. But right now, after their loss to Alabama, they're just 4-7 in the top two quadrants, and that's just not getting it done. They only have one win in quad 3 to get to 5-7, if you want to include that. So really no world where Missouri would get included right now in my mind. But they do play Mississippi State tomorrow at home. They have a South Carolina game next after that. And if they just clean up that record with those 2 wins, they might be back in by next Friday. So stay tuned on how the Tigers go. With Seton Hall, they might be a little closer to being in right now. They obviously have the interesting win over NC State still from way back at Maui. The unfortunate thing for the Pirates is they did take a DePaul loss. DePaul's not in the top 100 right now. They're working their way there. We'll see how the Blue Demons progress. But 2 teams that they beat on the road earlier now have coaches on the hot seat with Providence and Kansas State. So that's just a little bit of bad luck for the Pirates where those look like really important wins early. They're fading into deep quad 2 territory at this point. And their non-conference strength schedule for Seton Hall doesn't help much either. Sitting there at 247th, one of the lower on the totem pole strength schedules for obvious reasons. Like Seton Hall finished, I think, 10th last year. So they scheduled based on how they finished last year. And besides Maui, didn't have a lot of opportunities. They did go to Kansas State. Like, you got to give them credit for that, and they got the win. But it's not enough meat on the bone there. And then lastly, George Mason. Similar problems to Santa Clara. They don't have the quad 4 loss, but their best road win right now is LaSalle. We got to work on the road resume. They lost one at Rhode Island that really hurt a week ago. Their only other road win besides LaSalle's Fordham. They're both way out there in quad 3. And the 345th ranked non-conference series of the schedule, I get it. It's harder at George Mason to schedule than it is at places like Missouri and Seton Hall, but it's just historically going to be a eliminator if they're anywhere close. And so their game at the end of the year against St. Louis, we keep circling that one. But they'll have 2 games with VCU, which I think are going to be really important. Obviously, the road one's a quad 1. Just give us something kind of like what New Mexico has to chew on, and then maybe they can work their way into the field. But Lucas, who do you have for your last 4 out?
Yeah, I think you got a couple teams there fighting against precedent too. I think Missouri right now will be the lowest net team to get an at-large bid, and George Mason will have the lowest predicted metrics to get an at-large bid. Both of which doing their best to battle that, I think, 2022 Rutgers team. that
Yeah.
got in.
What didn't Rutgers finish 80? Is that what it was?
I thought they were
It was.
72, something like that, though.
Oh,
It's
is it there?
close.
Okay.
But I'll try to find it real quick. But for my
No
first
worries.
four out right now, I'm working on Seton Hall, Texas, TCU, and Santa Clara. You've obviously already hit on Santa Clara and Seton Hall, but with the Pirates for me right now, where I have them, I mean, you mentioned it. They might be closer to the field really than fourth out for you. Is they have a really inoffensive resume. In the grand scheme of things, none of their metrics are really all over the place like some of these teams are. Like to the point with George Mason, there's a 32 spot difference between their resume metrics and their predicted metrics. Seton Hall's between 48 and 58 across the board. They're 500 exactly against the upper two quadrants, no bad losses. To your point, though, with no bad losses, the non-conference strength of schedule makes it a lot harder to suffer like a quad 3 loss when 7 of their wins are in quadrant 4. Texas, I want to talk to you about Texas a little bit later. I'm sure you're not a huge fan of where I have Texas. Knowing where I know you feel about the meaningful games category, we'll get. I already am planning on talking to you a little bit more about Texas and TCU in somewhat of a similar boat with having quality wins, but also, but with Santa Clara, they're 2 of the only teams really in the at-large picture for me that have a quadrant 4 loss, and TCU also has a quadrant 3 loss to its name. So I think there's reasons to like Seton Hall as kind of a safe pick, whereas Texas and TCU are kind of my learning from last year. If they do the same thing with the quality wins outweighing what is a poor record in quality games, and Santa Clara also with relatively solid metrics, and to your point, with the wins they've had to date and the opportunities they still have remaining. Anything stand out to you before we get into what our consensus first 4 out is there, Rocco?
Do you want to dive into Texas real quick, or do you want to save them?
Sure. Let's talk Texas, because as a hint, Texas is not in our consensus first 4 out. So let's talk Texas.
Yeah. So with Texas, I mean, I had them in on Monday, so okay. I've been changed since last year, but I think already this year, I'm already impressed more with Texas's win at Alabama than anything they did last year for one single game. Last year, their best road win was an 8 seed Mississippi State. And then when they got to the SEC tournament, which typically, committees of the past have not taken as seriously, they beat a 4 seed in Texas A&M in Nashville during that run. But outside of that, there was really no justification for a team with 7 home losses to get selected. That has to be by far the most amount of home losses I've ever seen a team get in with. That's and it was also their larger story last year with a coach on the way out, with fans calling in, complaining every night after those home losses. Just an odd deal to see them get in, besides the fact that, I guess the ratings helped to put them in. But I think outside of that, this year's team is a much different team. Sean Miller's there. They're a work in progress. They took their lumps early. They've looked a lot better lately, at least in most of their results. I know they took a tough loss the other night, but that win at Alabama, beating Vanderbilt by 16 is pretty impressive, even if it's at home. Beating NC State on the islands. So they've got a nice little foundation to build with. Now they just got to balance out those records, or at least even if they're like a game or 2 under 500, based on what we learned last year, I'm probably going to put them back in. Right now, they're just a little too far out of bounds, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially like when you can, to my point of having them, I don't have them in the field because of the 4-9 record against quadrants 1 through 3. But when you compare 4 wins over the field compared to with one of those coming on the road and one of them coming on a neutral site, you compare that to the rest of the bubble right now, they certainly have a major leg up in that way. And like if you're going to look for a reason for inclusion, they have one. But with that in mind, they are not in our consensus first 4 out, which our consensus first 4 out as of today reads Missouri, Santa Clara, Seton Hall, and George Mason, which, again, looks pretty rock solid on, Rocco. And then
I think
Dagan go
I
ahead.
think Dagan just opened my email and didn't look at anybody else's picks.
Well, then tell me this. When our consensus next 4 out drops as Texas, Stanford, California, and TCU, is that your 4?
No, I had Oklahoma State above TCU, which I know TCU beat them head-to-head. They will play each other again. TCU is very interesting, obviously, with the quad 4 loss to New Orleans on opening night. They've got an amazing mix of results. And so, yeah, if I had a next 9, they would be the next team. Oklahoma State's kind of like Indiana right now. When you look at their resume, they just don't have the Purdue win yet, like Indiana got. And if Oklahoma State can step up and knock off one of the Big 12's best, we're going to suddenly start looking at them a lot differently. And so I wanted to at least list them because they host BYU next Wednesday. So they've got they have some pressure on them because winning at Utah is hard to do for a bubble team. So let's see if they can get that done tomorrow. But they will host BYU. Gallagher Iba, I'm sure, will be rocking. Steve Lutz is doing a really good job with that program. And if they get that BYU home win, I think things will look a lot prettier for the Pokes.
Yeah, I think it's certainly an interesting group of next 4 out. Even the next 4 out after that, I think you can make a case for being pretty close to field by Monday or by next Friday's show. It's very tight right now, and there's a lot of movement throughout the field, and we'll discuss the movement that's been between the top end and the bottom end, what the mid-tier seeds look like after this break.
As you know by now, we have teamed up with BetMGM again this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we will have special offers for Field of 68 fans, including same-game parlays, best-in-class live betting, and daily odds boost. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app. You sign up using bonus code FIELD. You deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Make this college basketball season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. If you're not a member of the Field of 68's On3 community, make sure to go check us out. Get access to all of Jeff Goodman and Rob Doster's written content, including coaching carousel breakdowns, info on who is and isn't entering the transfer portal, insider recruiting information from none other than Joe Tipton, X's and O's analysis of all the teams in college basketball, and access to our message board community. A 7-day trial costs you $1. The Field of 68 on 3. Get the scoop.
All right, Rocco, we've talked 1 seeds, we've talked bubble. Let's talk the middle. You know, those non-protected seeds, but non-teams that are really sweating it out too much yet. I mean, obviously, there's always a chance to need some deodorant the closer you get to March. But as you look at the mid-tier at-large teams right now, there's been some movement, and there always will be, especially this time of year when there's less results as you'll have in February and March. But one of the big movers, sticking with going to the SEC here. Kentucky drops to an 8 seed in our projected consensus field right now. Where do you see the Wildcats overall? Where do you think, moving forward then, their movement can go?
Yeah, Wildcats have been interesting. They ripped off those wins in a row, got the winning streak, and then, of course, it's never fun to lose the way they lost to Vanderbilt. They had some follies in there, if you remember that term from the old 80s NFL football follies. There was some follies for the Wildcats.
I was born in 1997, Rocco.
I know, but you're an old soul, Lucas. Let's go. But yeah, Kentucky, at the end of the day, it's a one result, right? And that's what you have to remind everybody anytime you're discussing bracketology is you have 31 opportunities in the regular season to put something on paper. And that only counts as one result. You're in the SEC where it's, again, another one of these leagues. I think almost all of them, from what I've seen, have very heavy backloaded schedules for the teams that were expected to be at the top. Kentucky fits that definition. And right now they have 10 games to go. They're 7-7 in the top 3 quadrants. So they're fine. They're definitely in. They have a road Tennessee win. They have the St. John's win from earlier this year, and they beat Indiana, which matters right now. Good enough for today. But I think as we go forward, they can't finish any worse than 4-6. I think if they're 3-7 down the stretch, however they get there, they're going to have to be left out. But 4-6, I think because they are Kentucky, and because one of those 4 would at least probably be another tournament level win, probably does the trick from a worst case scenario perspective. From a best case scenario perspective, you still have the Florida Gators on the schedule coming up. I know that game is being played in. I believe it is twice.
Yeah,
yes.
they get Florida twice.
Yeah, they got them on the last game of the season. Good call. I was pulling them up as I was talking, but they have Arkansas on the road coming up. That's going to be brutal tomorrow. But it's also, anytime I say the word brutal, I also am adding an opportunity, because in bracketology, that's your opportunity to make a big move and to get a piece of silver or a piece of gold on your resume. They're going to go to Auburn this year. Texas A&M's in first right now. They might not be amazing in the bracketology yet, but that's going to be a really important road opportunity as well. And you had a home Georgia, a home Tennessee. Almost every one of Kentucky's games has a lot of weight on it. And that's why I think with 4 and 6 down the stretch, they'll be fine. If they go like 7 and 3 or 8 and 2 and start really getting clicking again, then they're going to be in an opportunity to be somewhere around probably a 5 seed.
You can speak to a lot of these. Yeah, you can speak to a lot of these teams, the SEC, Big 10, Big 12 especially. The ACC not as much, but especially those 3 core top leagues right now. Like there's 5 seed line swings that they can have, like plus or minus 3 each direction probably for some of these schedules, just because of the way they are. And obviously the SEC represents opportunities to quickly rise seed lines, but also opportunities to kind of mount losses in a hurry. So I think that Kentucky's also, I think their drop, as I said in the intro, is like, I think sometimes a little overblown when teams drop seed lines. Is just how close seed lines are. It's only 4 teams in a seed line. Like if you're the last 7 seed and then 4 days later you're the top 8 seed, sometimes that feels catastrophic when you're looking at projections. Like, oh, we've dropped a seed line. You might have only dropped 1 spot, and you might not even have played. Obviously, Kentucky did in this case. But like Kentucky dropped to an 8 seed for me, and I moved SMU up to a 7, and SMU didn't play. That's how close some of these things are in seed lines. And I think it's sometimes forgotten how tight seed lines are between one another. And for Kentucky, the loss, really the problem is the margin, as you mentioned, in dropping them down. It's a 25-point loss, and that certainly hurts those predictive metrics that we've discussed throughout the show.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think also the other thing is, as a Butler fan yourself, I grew up like in Syracuse and Washington, and it sucks being in an 8-9 game.
Big zone defense fan out there.
That's right. I love zone defense. But the 8-9 game is like horrifying. I don't know if you remember, but when Florida Atlantic got an 8 seed, the year they ended up in the Final Four anyway, I think I panicked during the live show with Jeff Goodman. Because nobody wants to be in the 8-9 game. So even you could explain till you're blue in the face to a Big Blue Nation person that they went from 28th, the last 7 seed on the overall seed list, to 29th, and it's really just 1 spot. All they care about is if they're in an 8-9 game. And so that's how close the margins are.
Yeah, I remember having the conversation my freshman year of college with my now wife about Butler getting, I believe it was an 8 it was a 9 that year. It was 2016. Butler got a 9 and faced Texas Tech, and they won in the second round. It was the Malcolm Brogdon shut down Andrew Travis second half, and she was like, "What is going on?" And I'm like, "Well, we got the 1 seed in the second round, and that's your problem with the 8-9." And I think that Kentucky, I think, to the point of the predictive metrics being something that, as time goes on, your team's resume should reach those levels. I think that Kentucky's a team that's probably going to find itself more in the 6-7 range, just in terms of, I am not making that joke. That was an accident. It's the first time I've slipped up on that. I don't think Kentucky's going to be in the 8-9 when you get down the line. I think they're going to have the opportunities and hit on enough of them to move up seed lines. But as far as, bracketology goes, what we do is project things in the moment and as they are. And as they are right now, they're my top 8 seed right now.
Yeah, and I've still got them as my last number 7. So maybe Kentucky fans will like me a little bit more for one day, but obviously 1 spot apart.
Well, if I'm top 8 and you're last 7, we can blame the other 2 as having them definitely on the 8 or the 9 as our reasoning. Yeah. So we'll take the skate by free on this one. But teams, going up. The Houston Cougars. We've already discussed teams that could potentially end up on the number 1 line. You chose Illinois. I chose Iowa State. But in part of that, I mentioned Houston as a team I gave some consideration to. Where do you stand on Houston as a possible 1 seed as their season goes on?
It's almost like an of course answer that they can do it, and we've seen it in years past.
Yeah.
Even before they were in the Big 12, they did it when they were in the American Conference. Now they get the opportunities to continue to make it bulletproof from a resume standpoint. Obviously, the slip up in Lubbock last week, which isn't much of a slip up. That's still a really tough place to get a win. It was a heck of a game, and they beat that same team at home. So. But when you look at the rest of Houston's opportunities, they're going to Iowa State, your boys that you love. They're going to BYU, which is going to be extremely hard, and going to the Fog is extremely hard. But Houston's had good success there in the first couple of years in this league. They also host Arizona, and that's a game where the fine folks in the desert might actually have Houston as the favorite. I'm not sure how that plays out. Dagan would know. But they also get a game against UCF, which they should win. That right now is another tournament opportunity. So, again, they're just notching if they win through these games, which we know Houston can do. They've done it before. And Calvin Simpson himself has been saying it since the beginning of the year with the amount of freshmen. And, of course, Fleming's being their best player, a freshman. They're just going to continue to get more confident and understand the physicality, the defense. So all the schematics are going to get sharper as we go week by week, as they have been for this program. So I think it's really realistic that Houston can get to a 1 seed. But again, because they've already taken a couple losses, they have to be near perfect. So not a lot of margin for error, but if anybody can do it, I think Houston's certainly a great candidate. How do you feel?
Well, I think one of the things for Houston is the difficulty of playing so many of those games on the road makes it hard to just pick up those kinds of wins. BYU's on the road, Iowa State's on the road, Kansas is all on the road. The only home game against those top-level teams you mentioned being against Arizona. I think that makes it difficult. But also, every brutality is an opportunity at the same case. But I think that because of the way they're going to have to jump teams, I think it's going to be harder to do so. I do think that they're, if I had to pick teams most likely to get 1 seeds right now, they're probably number 6 on my list. Behind the 4 1 seeds already, and then my case I made already for Iowa State. I do think that there's a really good chance the Big 12 ends up with 2 1 seeds by the time comes, and they're certainly one of those teams in the mix to be there. And with both these teams we've discussed now recently, Kentucky and Houston, both of them are teams that are part of these big conferences, these mega conferences that, one, make life absolute hell for bracketing principles at this point in the year, especially, but also provide endless amounts of opportunities. And one of the teams we've seen really take advantage of those opportunities recently has been Auburn. They get the road win over Florida as part of what's now a 4-game win streak. I believe a week and a half ago we had Auburn as a projected number 10 seed in our consensus field. They're now a projected number 6. I also have them on my 6 line. Where do you have the Tigers right now, and how much have you seen things shift over these 2 weeks for them?
Absolutely. As a 6 seed as well, just like I think our consensus had, if I read it correctly this morning.
You're correct.
And
me consensus, all 6.
That's all that matters. Sorry, Brad and DJ. It's all about me and Lucas today. But yeah, I think with the Tigers, first of all, when it comes to moving up the board, which is what they've done rapidly in this 4-game winning streak, it's all about just comparing one team to the next. So in order to start winning comparisons and you want to move up the board, road wins are the key to life in this exercise. And going to the Swamp and beating Florida the way they did a week ago, they added another road win during this stretch as well. It's just going to continue to age with time. I think Florida has a big opportunity long-term to be a great team. Obviously, they've lost a lot of close games, but their power numbers speak for their danger level. And that win on the road for Auburn will continue to age well. I think overall, it's pretty easy. For me, the last 6 seed came down to Auburn or Louisville. We saw Auburn pick up another really good win. We saw Louisville get blasted against an elite team. It was pretty easy for me to go with Auburn because after that, not only in the records and the road, who has the better road win, all of the things that I value, all the other stuff like the power numbers and even I think the WAB has Auburn above Louisville. So that was one example. You can compare Auburn to a bunch of teams in that group, but that's where I landed. I know Clemson's around there, St. John's is around there, and also Auburn beat St. John's. So if you want to compare those two, almost like the college football committee said, right? If they're next to each other in the comparison, head-to-head matters more. So if you ended up with Auburn versus St. John's, pretty easy to go with Auburn since they played in Las Vegas. And I like the way they're playing. The rest of their schedule, how high they can get, I know you were wondering about that as well. I think with playing Alabama twice, that will go a long way. They have a bunch of big games still with Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Tennessee. But I also think there's been some inconsistent play from this team. Some disappointing finishes. I know the Texas A&M game, they were challenging and protesting if that shot got off. But they basically gave that game away well before we got to that point in the game. And they've had a couple concerning results where they just fell apart down the stretch. Hopefully this winning streak is helping them get more confident and they won't slip back into that mode. But based on just the roller coaster this year's been, I really don't know where this team's going to land. They could keep climbing, but they could fall back down to 10 for all we've seen. But what are your thoughts?
My apologies. I'm back now. I muted because I had to cough. And I forgot to unmute myself. Man, how COVID time zooms of me to not unmute. But to your point of how much you've looked over my shoulder this week, I feel like Louisville to me was my top 7 seed, as you mentioned. The only team for a while I had between Auburn and Louisville was Clemson. And then I ended up with the St. John's comparison, and I put Auburn above St. John's too. So to your point, my 4-run stretch there is Auburn, St. John's, Clemson, Louisville, last 3 6s, first 7. And as far as where Auburn can move, I mean, the upcoming schedule is as telling as it's going to be. These next 4 games will determine what the ceiling, I think, is going to be. That's Tennessee on the road, Alabama and Vanderbilt at home, then they go on the road at Arkansas. Not just games that matter for moving up seed lines, but head-to-head results that matter along those seed lines. Like Tennessee is probably a projected 5 or 6. Alabama maybe a little higher than that, but probably not much. Vanderbilt, I think, higher than both, but Arkansas still in the mix too. Plus, I already have 1 win over Arkansas this year. So I think those are not just big results in terms of being able to build a stronger resume, but being able to build potential head-to-head matchups when you're evaluating teams, if it really comes down to that. Head-to-head and across a couple seed lines.
Yeah, if I'm an Auburn fan, you have to take it with a grain of salt, but the results are the results so far. They've already got 5 losses at the top, which don't really hurt them. It's just a bigger quantity. And then you have the 2 losses in quad 2. So you can't do anything about that at this stage. And we'll see if A&M keeps soaring. Maybe that becomes a quad 1 loss later. But at the end of the day, with 7 losses, I think the absolute ceiling, if they were just, let's just imagine in a dream world, they go and run the table or just lose 1 down the stretch from here. 3 seed is still possible technically. But I think if Auburn, you win a big chunk of those games, you beat a lot of quality teams along the way. Obviously, you got to beat Alabama at least once. I think their goal should be to become a protected seed. And I think that if they play good enough basketball, that is an attainable goal.
Now, we've discussed a lot of the show where teams are right now. We've discussed where teams can go in the future, but in the immediate future, hit me with what you're watching this weekend, Rocco, outside of the one you're going to be visiting tonight.
Yes, sir. Well, I think, first of all, the heavyweights, there's a lot of good ones. We've dropped a few in as we've gone through the show, but I like to specialize on the bubble, so I'm going to focus there. And this was not intentional, but we landed with a ton of California-level bubble games. I guess we're the land of the bubble for this season. But it starts at UCLA hosting Indiana. We talked about that for a second earlier. This one should be obvious. Indiana, the last team in the field. If they can get their first road win against a tournament caliber team at UCLA, not only will they be safely in the next projection, that'll just go a long ways. They also have a game at USC afterwards. So between those two, I know Indiana's approaching it to get at least one of those wins. But it would also put UCLA deeper into bubble talks once again, which they were creeping into this area before. Then they got the Purdue win to kind of get out of jail. So that's a really important game. San Diego State and Utah State are going to help settle this Mountain West debate, at least for a day. Utah State's got a tremendous home court advantage, but San Diego State's plenty capable. I think Magoon Guath is probably missing this one once again, but Aztecs have elite guards. Utah State doesn't want to take another home loss. They already have the ugly one to UNLV. If they keep taking home losses, they're going to be very quickly in this bubble discussion. And San Diego State, they're trying to prove, hey, if we don't win the Mountain West tournament, we need to leave no doubt for the committee that we belong. And this is their biggest opportunity left in the regular season. So really important game for both teams. Then I'm going to get really greasy here with California at Miami. This one should be obvious. California's got three. It's a great bubble battle. And it's just such an unnatural conference game that we try to find an excuse to talk about it anyway. But California's got 3 good wins. One of them was in San Francisco against UCLA. The other one was at home against North Carolina. And the third one was also in California. So I want to see them win a game outside of the state that matters. They stubbed their toe at Fear the Spear, Florida State, a couple nights ago. So this will be an ultimate makeup call against the bigger profile team in Miami. Miami, at the same time, as we were talking about before the show, a little bit of a foundation made on quicksand. They haven't stabilized their foundation. In a home loss, you can really start poking holes in the Hurricane resume. And quickly, the other ones, obviously we have the big one, Lucas, St. Mary's at Gonzaga. St. Mary's still trying to a win for them would probably go a long ways and be really hard to ever leave them out. But another loss, you can really kind of pick their resume apart. On the flip side, Gonzaga is trying to win the league, which they haven't done. They lost. They didn't win the league last year, so pretty big stakes there. And then a really good one for you for the SoCon first place, East Tennessee State at Wofford. Obviously, no at-large talk there, but it is going to be at least my SoCon rep will be the winner of that game. How about for you?
I'll hit you with a pardon the interruption, big finish here. Obviously, Michigan at Michigan State, a big one. BYU at Kansas, Texas Tech at UCF, Texas A&M, Georgia, really good bubble battle. Ohio State at Wisconsin, Auburn at Tennessee, Kentucky at Arkansas. I think a few that I'm looking at in the bubble in particular you didn't mention, Virginia Tech hosting Duke, and then 3 teams on the outside looking in that need to defend home court this week to stay in that first 8 out. I could see any of Missouri, Butler, Seton Hall falling out of that top 8 out if they were to lose any of their games at home against Mississippi State, Georgetown, and Marquette, respectively. Don't sleep on Sunday either. Illinois at Nebraska, Alabama at Florida. And I believe that should do it for this episode of Fielding the 68. Thank you for dealing with myself, Lucas Harkins, throughout my sickness tonight. Working through a cold, and I apologize for my earlier mute. And I always am appreciative to spend the time talking brackets with Mr. Rocco Miller.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the basketball.